Sorry, I'm opening Photoshop.
You're good.
So while we're waiting,
Why am I in Photoshop?
cause I'm about to learn you some shit.
Oh.
What do you know about the multiverse?
I mean, it's like the idea that every decision you have in your life, there's a universe where like each decision you could have made.
Yeah, that's exactly what the multiverse idea is. You've heard about how light is both a wave and a particle, right?
Yeah, and it depends on whether it's observed or not.
Yeah. So what that looks like is basically there's a thing called the double slit experiment. Have you heard about it?
Vaguely, isn't that what they use to, what like the flat earthers use to prove that the Earth is round? You know that thing?
I have no idea.
What's the double slit experiment?
Okay, so the double slit experiment, it's like it sounds. You take a sheet of something that's translucent and you cut 2 slits in it and put some kind of detector behind it, and then you shine a light on it. And basically, if light acted purely as a photon, then when it shone through this double slit, it would just form 2 slits. But because light acts as a wave as well, what happens is if you let it pass through the slits without any observation, then there is a bunch of probable locations as to where that photon will hit. This one shows a pretty good. And so each of the yellow parts are different locations where it's most likely to hit. If you think of Schrodinger's cat, the cat's in the box with some radioactive material, and then until you open the box, theoretically, the cat is both alive and dead because nothing is observing it. So there's a lot that analogy kind of glosses over, as the mainstream understands it at least, because what it's talking about is behavior that's observed on the level of like electrons, not a cat. Really, my problem with Schrodinger's cat and like this idea that it's both dead and alive at the same time is that if we take the double slit experiment, basically if we use the logic of Schrodinger's cat, we're basically saying the light is at every single point here and also not at every single point, which isn't probability. Probability is saying that it could be this state or the other, but this is saying that it's this state and the other simultaneously, 2 states at once. That just can't happen. Anyways, going back to what we were talking about before, whenever a light is shown on these double slits, it will output this probability graph as opposed to one single slit, one single line. And that is known. Like, that is fact. What isn't known is if there is truly another universe being created. Because to me, it's absurd. Because, okay, let's say you make an action. You expect me to believe that there is a whole other universe instantaneously created where I make a different decision. My biggest problem with this is, where does that energy come from? Because you, let's say, let go of a ball. There is a set amount of energy there. Like, the universe doesn't have infinite energy. Well, it might if it's infinitely large, but the energy that's around us that makes us up, it's not infinite. And if you're gonna claim that a whole nother universe is just spontaneously created, you gotta talk about where that energy would come from. Now, I look at...
Is it really it's like creating a different universe, or is it more that one just exists?
Well, the way I understand it is that in order for a universe to exist, there has to be a choice or a decision that was made. So instead of going left, you went right. And so right there, a universe is created where you went left instead of right, or whatever it is. But this is all, in my opinion, just a way for people to wrap their heads around the fact that our universe is not deterministic. It is probability based. And that's freaky. Yeah. Like, that's weird. That's weird.
Yeah, it really is.
And I have a hypothesis, actually. I have a theory. I think that all these particles that exhibit wave-particle duality, I think they're all a fourth dimensional structure that we just intersect with at various points. And that sounds way more complicated than I think I can make it, because I came up with a really good analogy. So let's say you have like some creature living on that two-dimensional universe. It can see like...
Is it gonna be like the thing turning the hat around?
Turning the hat around?
Okay, never mind.
I don't know what that is.
An example of like universes someone used. It's like in a 2D universe, like there's a certain way that a 3-dimensional being could manipulate an object that a 2-dimensional creature would not be able to.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is basically where I'm going with this, kind of. So basically, if you have a 2-dimensional plane and you have a creature there, let's say you shone a light on that piece of paper from above. That creature will have no fucking idea where that light is coming from. But it knows it's there. It can see it. It has no concept of where it could be coming from because it's in the third dimension. It can't even conceptualize a location for it. So when you shine that light on there, you can move your finger in front of that light, and that casts a shadow. And the creature on the plane can see the shadow. And that is very similar to how probability functions, really, is what it is. Describe where a photon might hit. And the way I think about this is, when you observe something, you are necessarily somehow touching it. Observation is interaction. That's what makes it observation. Even when you look at something, photons are going from that something into your eye. Anytime you detect something, there has to have been a physical interaction. So one of the tenets in this is all interactions between objects of any kind must be physical in some way. And by physical, I mean physics-based. So like magnetism, electromagnetism, all that is fair game. But I actually think that those forces that we see, those really weird, freaky forces, are because of nonsense happening in a higher dimension that I can't even begin to speculate what's going on there. But basically, whenever you have a photon and you observe it, the lingo that we use is the wave function collapses into a single solution. Basically, what that means is it can be
It's like choose notation.
Is that what?
Like choose notation, like a probability.
Choose notation? I don't know what that is.
Never mind.
Well, anyways, we call it a probability cloud. And really, you see this a lot with electrons, because they're orbiting, a nucleus, right? And so, remember the shadow analogy. The electron cloud is basically like a 3-dimensional shadow. That's how I think of it, at least. It's this 3-dimensional shadow of this 4th-dimensional object that's, I don't know, it's like somehow there's a light shining onto our world, and it's in between that. And when we observe it, we're interacting with it. And the way I think of that is, imagine that finger that's casting the shadow. Imagine we lower it, or we start to lower it. As we do, that shadow gets smaller and smaller. And eventually, the finger touches the plane. That is interaction. That is why it collapses into a single point. Because, and this is not proven. This is my crackpot bullshit, but I actually think it's true. But actually, it could be proven. I don't know. I haven't looked this up. But basically, it's the intersection of these 4th-dimensional objects in our 3-dimensional world. And so I bring all this up because when you use that model, it doesn't make any sense to purport that different actions create separate universes. It's far more likely to me that the universe has whatever it has. It contains all the matter and energy that it has. We know that it contains more matter than we can see. That's why we have dark matter. And that's why it's called dark matter, because we don't know anything about it. We literally know jack all about it. And it could be that the rest of the mass that we see is actually above our plane. but it still interacts with us. I actually don't know about that. Again, this is all my crackpot conspiracy, but it would make sense to me that there would be multiple universes if we saw energy being transferred somewhere. Because if you commit an action and then through that action 2 universes are spawned, then at some point they both interacted with each other, right? They're linked somehow. And if they're linked, that means that they
have an intersection.
Yeah, and that means that they would have to be somehow interacting with each other. And if there's interaction, that means energy. And if there's energy transfer, then we should be able to see that. And I don't think we do. I honestly think it's 4th dimensional objects making its way into our 3-dimensional world. That makes so much more sense than the stupid fucking multiverse theory.